Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission says it has delisted 1.1 million people out of the 2.5 million fresh registrants that registered between June 28, 2021 and January 14, 2022. The Commission says it did that because their records were found to be invalid and consequently delisted. INEC also says it has discovered several double, multiple and ineligible registrants while cleaning up the voters register using the automated biometric identification system ahead of the 2023 general elections. The electoral body is assuring the public that only valid registrants will be added to the existing national register and will be published nationwide for scrutiny. Well, to help us understand these issues, I'm now being joined from Lagos by Samson Itodo, who's the Executive Director of YIAGA Africa. He's also a lawyer and a pro-democracy activist. Thank you so much, Samson, for joining us. Let's talk about this ABIS, the Automated Biometric Identification System. Is this something that you've all discussed these issues with on INEC, on how this software works, and why do we have so many people getting close to 1.1 million being invalidated? Isn't it an indictment on INEC and its staff? Is it that these people made mistakes or they were not properly captured, apart from the multiple registrations that we've had from INEC?
Well, thank you very much, Sambo, and good evening to everyone. I think there are three things we need to put in context. That this announcement made by INEC, it's actually not new, because in April this year, when INEC was announcing the production of the PVCs for those who registered in the first and the second phase of the CVR process, and the first phase and second phase started from June 28 to the first to second week of January. INEC did announce in April that 46%, because the 1 point something million registered voters constitute 46% of those who registered in the first and second phase, had their details invalidated for two reasons. One, there was incomplete information provided on either the voter registration portal or when they completed that biometric capture at INEC. And what kind of information was incomplete? Well, INEC didn't tell us in April that these were the categories of information that were incomplete. The second reason was that there was double or multiple registration, as you find. Now, you note that in this particular voter registration process, INEC introduced the pre-registration, which is online. Quite an innovative and progressive step taken by the Commission, because it encouraged a lot of people. And so these are the two reasons, because first, on one part, the registration did not meet the business process, because INEC has a duty, once a registration is concluded, to clean up the register. It's not the first time INEC is cleaning up the register. In 2017, it did same. There are about 4.7 million multiple registrant or invalidated registration, and that is what we also found. So it's just an attempt to sanitize the entire process. But I feel that INEC needs to be more open. When you say incomplete information, what kind of information did the voters not provide? The third thing that I think it's important that we need to also note is the level of misinformation that was out there in the public, deceiving Nigerians to go and re-register, even when their names were on the register. The law is very clear that if you register more than once, it is an electoral offense. So double registration or multiple registration is an offense in the electoral law. But INEC is taking that as a remedial action. But you cannot blame, to an extent, you can't blame, people who register twice, because there was that misinformation out there. How did INEC, respond to that misinformation? How did also other stakeholders counter that misinformation? Because we know political actors, key political actors, told voters and the public to go and reactivate their PVCs because their PVCs was invalid. And that was falsehood that was propagated, in the public space, and it deceived a lot of people. Now, those registrations have been invalidated. So I think that, yes, this invalidation is attest to the robustness of INEC systems to detect this double registration. Because if they don't, if they don't remove this double registration, you're going to find situations where these people will have 2 PVCs or 3 PVCs, and they will go and vote multiple times in the 2023 election. So for us, even in civil society, this is how we approach this. But INEC needs to be a lot more open, needs to be a lot more responsive to misinformation, especially when they seek to derail voters from following the laid down procedure. But cleaning up the register is actually an attempt to boost the credibility of the voters' register.
Yeah, I mean, very good observation there, Samson. But you would have seen that there's a lot of interest by many Nigerians, especially young people, to want to participate in the election. Isn't there something that we can do? For example, if it's just their photos that are not available, can these people be given a second chance to go and just validate their photos? Or if it's their biometrics, for example, their fingerprints, and can they be given an opportunity to just go and complete that if that's the case, if it's not a case of multiple registration, at least to accommodate them because of their interest in ensuring that they participate within the electoral process?
Well, this is why I said, Sambo, INEC did not share that information with the public. And I think that it was a misstep. The commission should tell Nigerians, okay, when you say incomplete information, what do you mean? What kind of information do voters need to provide? Let's assume in the first phase of the registration, which is the pre-registration, they didn't provide information like their name, like their date of birth or their origin, or those data, personal data that they capture. Could they have updated that information when the people showed up, to get captured at the INEC local government offices? I think they could have done that. But we cannot say, this is why I say there's a level of transparency that we require from INEC to tell Nigerians, what kind of info, when you say there was incomplete information, what kind of incomplete information? But the statement that came out of INEC in April didn't provide this information. You cannot also discountenance the fact that you have double registration. And there were reasons why some people actually registered twice, because for a lot of people, it was just sheer ignorance. They just didn't know, because the level of education at the public space was very limited. And so politicians had a field day propagating all forms of falsehood and fake news that the PVCs were expired and people needed to go and reactivate it. Of course, if high impact individuals make those kinds of statements, they misinform the public and the public responds. Now, these people have responded, to this fake news and misinformation, and this is where it has landed them. This is why, we also need, as a country and as a people, to provide a very strong response against individuals, particularly politicians, who make these kinds of statements that seek to mislead the public. But the credibility of the voters' register is actually central to this. And I think that, to your question, could we have done something better? I think INEC could have done something better, especially for cases where they establish that if people submitted incomplete information. They could have explored other ways of obtaining that information from the public. But honestly, let's call it what it is. If people registered twice, if people registered double or multiple times, it is an offense in the electoral law, and ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Because we know that there are politicians who deliberately mobilize people to register more than once, more than twice. We shouldn't condone that within our electoral process. So we just need to strike a balance. Now, whilst we seek to promote, protect the interest of innocent Nigerians who are unaware of this entire process, we must also make efforts to hold people who subvert the process intentionally just because they want to compromise the credibility of the voters' register.
Yeah, I mean, we must make it very clear that, I mean, one of the presidential candidates, especially that of the APC, Bola Tinubu, actually made that comment, one of those comments, and he later had to apologize, and it was over expired PVC, allegations of an expired PVC and all of that. Some of these persons have also said that some of those PVCs are actually not showing anything on them. They are very clean at the moment. And so it's part of that anxiety that made them to go and do another registration. What do you say to that? And then secondly, some people are beginning to make political capital out of this unfortunate situation, saying that some certain parts of the country are being targeted and being prevented from voting in 2023. What will you say to that too?
Well, at this point, I'm not going to dispel or discountenance any information. People have a right, to express their worries and their concerns. What you see is just symptomatic of the trust deficit within the electoral process. When you have broken trust between the state and its citizens, even when the state is acting in the interest of its citizens, citizens would always question and doubt it. So what we are grappling with is actually this lack of trust within the electoral process. So I wouldn't in any way discountenance the fears that people are expressing about a likelihood of voter suppression, whether could this be used as one of the shenanigans of our political actors to suppress the vote or dilute the impact of the votes from certain parts of the country. I'm not going to discountenance that. I will be interested in ensuring that every Nigerian who is of voting age and has registered should be able to get their PVCs. The Nigerian state and INEC owes a duty to every Nigerian who is on the voters register that their PVCs are produced and those individuals get their PVCs. And I think it's important because it's not a privilege, right? It's a right that citizens have, a constitutional right. So INEC needs to ensure that those PVCs are produced. If INEC is having challenges with producing the PVCs, and so far, they've not admitted, they've not informed Nigerians that they're having challenges. They have said that the PVCs will be ready in October. We will wait until October. When the PVCs are ready, Nigerians will go and collect their PVCs and vote for voters of their choice. The second critical point, Sambo, that we need to make is the fact that citizens have fears, and these fears are legitimate fears because they've seen cases where their PVCs are produced, they go to collect their PVCs, officials ask them to pay before they collect their PVCs. In the recent Osun elections, just recent Osun elections, where an INEC, an ad hoc staff who was responsible for PVCs distribution, denied people of their PVCs and was trying to sell those PVCs to them later. When you have these kinds of sharp practices, it undermines public trust in the electoral process. So INEC has a fundamental role, but the political actors who are also at the forefront of ensuring that they do not play by the rules are the people we should also hold to account. We want to see a situation where any politician who either propagates fake news or who tries to buy PVCs or suppress votes is arrested and is prosecuted. If you don't hold them to account, they're going to have a field day, and then the outcome of the 2023 elections will not enjoy the popular will of the Nigerian people. And when you do so, the political legitimacy question becomes unanswered because the product from any system or any process of that cannot be said to be legitimate in every ramification.
Right. Well, you've raised some very critical points here, considering our society where certain people are given the status of being sacred cows. We hope to see if indeed violators of the Electoral Act will be punished ahead of the 2023 national elections, irrespective of their status or whether they are the leading contenders in the election or not. But we must thank you so much, Samson Itodo, who is the Executive Director of YIAGA Africa, is a lawyer and pro-democracy activist. We must thank you immensely for joining us from Lagos. Well, that has been for this edition of the Arise interview. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye and thank you for watching. I'm Samson.